Have you ever experienced that moment when she suddenly goes silent? No texts, no calls, just nothing. That sinking feeling in your stomach tells you something's wrong, but you have no idea what. That's not an accident, that's by design. What if I told you that her silence isn't just absence, it's a weapon, a calculated psychological weapon that most men never recognize until it's too late. While you're anxiously checking your phone, wondering what you did wrong, she's executing one of the most powerful Machiavellian strategies in female psychology. You feel confused, desperate, even slightly panicked. You start replaying conversations in your head, looking for what you might have said wrong. You consider apologizing, even when you've done nothing wrong. This is exactly where she wants you. Today, you're going to understand the invisible power game that's been played against you your entire life. I'm going to decode the female weaponization of silence, a strategy that has controlled men for centuries, and give you the exact tools to turn this manipulation back on itself. This isn't about hating women. It's about understanding a primal psychological game that men are losing because they don't even know they're playing. By the end of this video, you'll never be manipulated by feminine silence again. When a woman goes silent on you, understand this first. It is rarely spontaneous or emotional. Even when it seems reactive, there's an instinctive strategic element at work. Female psychology is naturally attuned to social dynamics in ways that male psychology often misses. Her silence is a form of invisible psychological power that serves multiple strategic functions. You need to understand that in the female mind, communication itself is currency. When she withdraws this currency, she's not just expressing displeasure, she's executing a power move designed to regain control of the emotional terrain between you. Think about it. When she goes silent, what happens to you? You become preoccupied. You check your phone more. You wonder what's wrong. Your mind starts racing. You lose focus at work. You can't fully enjoy time with friends. In that moment, she has colonized your mental space without saying a single word. This is psychological dominance at its most efficient. The first way women use silence is as an invisible punishment. You failed some unspoken test, violated some unnamed rule, and now you're being sanctioned. The genius of this strategy is its ambiguity. If she yelled at you, you'd have something concrete to address. But her silence, it's a blank canvas where your insecurities paint their worst fears. Remember the last time a woman in your life suddenly stopped responding? Think about what you did. You probably sent a follow-up text, maybe another. You started with casual messages, then showed concern, and finally, if you're like most men, you reached the stage of subtle desperation. Hey, are you okay? Did I do something wrong? In that moment, you've surrendered. You've accepted blame for an offense you can't even name. You've positioned yourself as the wrongdoer and her as the judge. And what did it cost her? Nothing. Not a single word. This is Machiavellian strategy at its finest. Maximum impact with minimum effort. The second function of female silence is the creation of ambiguity. Humans crave certainty. We need to know where we stand. A woman's strategic silence denies you this basic psychological comfort. When she goes silent, multiple possibilities exist simultaneously. Is she busy? Angry? Losing interest? Testing you? Found someone else? This uncertainty is psychologically unbearable for most men, who are biologically wired to resolve threats and establish clear status in relationships. In this vacuum of information, your mind becomes your worst enemy. You begin to catastrophize. You imagine scenarios. You interpret her previous behaviors looking for clues, and in this process, you elevate her importance in your mind to dangerous levels. Think of it like a psychological horror movie versus an action film. In action, you can see the threat. In horror, the threat exists in shadows and silence, and that's always more terrifying. Women instinctively understand this principle. What's unsaid is often more powerful than what's spoken. The third strategy at work is anxiety induction. Her silence creates a specific emotional state in you that compromises your rational thinking. When someone important to you suddenly goes silent, your brain registers it similarly to a physical threat. Your amygdala, the primitive fear center, activates. Stress hormones like cortisol flood your system. Your prefrontal cortex responsible for logical thinking, becomes impaired. This is why you've made some of your worst decisions when trying to regain a woman's attention during her periods of silence. You're literally not thinking straight. Your brain is in survival mode, and in this state, you're highly manipulable. You'll agree to things you normally wouldn't. You'll compromise boundaries you usually maintain. You'll make concessions you'll later regret, all because her silence has chemically altered your brain state to one of primal anxiety. Next time you feel that anxiety rising because she hasn't responded, recognize it for what it is: a physiological response being leveraged against you in a psychological power play. The fourth function of female silence is value projection. In all markets, scarcity creates value. Attention economics works the same way. When a woman withdraws her communication, she's creating an artificial scarcity of her attention. This immediately increases her perceived value in your mind. Suddenly, the texts or calls you took for granted yesterday become precious commodities you'd do anything to receive today. It's a brilliant reversal of the supply-demand dynamic in the relationship. By going silent, she's essentially saying, "My attention is valuable and limited. Prove you deserve it." And most men fall right into this trap, offering more and more of their own attention, validation, and resources just to restore normal communication. This is particularly effective because it triggers the male competitive instinct. When something becomes harder to obtain, men instinctively want it more. It's the same psychological trigger that makes exclusive clubs desirable precisely because they're hard to get into. Her silence transforms her from an equal participant in the relationship to a scarce resource you must compete for. And once you're competing for her, the power dynamic has fundamentally shifted. The fifth and perhaps most important function of female silence is hierarchical repositioning, the complete inversion of the pursuit dynamic. When she goes silent, she forces you into the position of pursuer. You send the extra texts, you make the calls, you ask the questions, you seek the validation, you offer reassurance. In other words, you invest more. And in any human relationship, the person who invests more is, by definition, the subordinate position. This is the brutal mathematics of interpersonal power. Whoever cares less has more control. Her silence is a deliberate demonstration that she can care less, or at least appear to. It forces you to reveal that you care more, weakening your position in the unspoken power hierarchy between you. The next time you find yourself double texting or anxiously checking your phone, understand what's really happening. You're being repositioned in the relationship hierarchy through one of the oldest female power moves in existence. Now we arrive at the most critical revelation, the moment where all these strategies converge into the master mechanism of female psychological control. The ultimate power of feminine silence lies in its ability to make you surrender your masculine frame entirely. When a woman successfully deploys silence against you, the culmination of her strategy is your complete psychological submission. This submission manifests in 5 devastating ways. First, you begin apologizing for things you haven't done. "I'm sorry if I upset you," you text, when you've committed no actual offense. This is a profound surrender of your reality to hers. Think about how many times you've sent that message, a message that admits guilt for a crime you can't even name. With each of these apologies, you're training her that silence is an effective tool to extract compliance from you. Second, you start overcompensating. You offer extra attention, gifts, compliments, or concessions, anything to restore normal communication. In doing so, you've accepted an uneven exchange rate where her basic attention costs your premium effort. I've seen men buy expensive gifts, plan elaborate dates, or even make major relationship commitments, all triggered by nothing more than a woman's calculated silence. The investment imbalance becomes catastrophic. Third, you begin to self-censor. You mentally review what you'll say before you say it, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another episode of silence. Your authentic self-expression is now compromised. This is particularly insidious because it happens gradually. You don't wake up one day deciding to censor yourself. Instead, your brain creates unconscious associations. Certain topics, opinions, or behaviors lead to her withdrawal, so you instinctively avoid them. Over time, You become a diluted version of yourself, carefully curated to avoid activating her silent treatment. Fourth, you develop an unconscious anxiety response to her patterns. Even when things are good, part of you stays vigilant for signs that she might withdraw again. This background anxiety ensures she maintains a psychological edge. Your nervous system becomes conditioned like Pavlov's dogs, except instead of salivating at a bell, you experience anxiety at subtle cues that predict her withdrawal. A slight change in her texting pattern, a certain tone of voice. A specific expression. Your subconscious is perpetually scanning for threats, keeping you in a subtle state of psychological subordination. Finally, and this is the true victory for female strategy, you internalize the idea that her withdrawal is always justified. You accept the premise that if she goes silent, you must have deserved it. Her frame has completely replaced yours. This is the ultimate psychological conquest, when you believe that her emotional reactions are always valid and yours are always suspect. At this stage, you don't just modify your behavior, you modify your perception of reality itself to align with hers. Let me show you what this looks like in action. Imagine you express an opinion she disagrees with. She goes silent. You panic and backtrack. What just happened? You've learned that your authentic thoughts are less important than her approval. Next time, that opinion stays hidden. Or picture this scenario. You make plans with friends. She goes silent, indicating disapproval without directly forbidding you to go. You cancel your plans to focus on fixing the situation with her. Now she's successfully isolated you from your support network without having to explicitly demand it. Perhaps most dangerous is when you achieve something positive, a promotion, recognition, a personal victory, and her response is silence rather than celebration. This plants the subconscious idea that your success threatens her in some way. Many men begin downplaying their achievements or ambitions as a result, stunting their own growth to avoid triggering her silent disapproval. Look at your past relationships honestly. How many times have you experienced these 5 submissions? This is the endgame of feminine silence as a power strategy, not just to win a momentary battle, but to establish a permanent psychological dominance where you perpetually seek approval and avoid disapproval. The truly masterful aspect of this strategy is its plausible deniability. If you confront her about using silence as manipulation, she can easily respond, "I just needed space. I wasn't doing anything. I was just processing my feelings." This gaslights you into questioning your own perception of what's happening, reinforcing her psychological upper hand. This is Machiavellian genius at work, using minimal resources to establish maximum control. The most powerful prison is the one where the prisoner believes the cell door is locked when it actually isn't. Her silence builds that psychological cell around you, one quiet moment at a time. And until this moment, you probably never even recognized it was happening. Now that you've seen behind the curtain of one of the most powerful female psychological strategies, you have a choice to make. Will you continue playing a game rigged against you, or will you rewrite the rules? The first step is simply awareness. The next time she goes silent, recognize the strategy for what it is. Don't panic. Don't overreact. Don't fill the silence with desperate attempts to regain her attention. Instead, mirror her behavior. Understand that whoever breaks the silence first surrenders power. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. This counterintuitive approach disrupts her entire strategy. When your response to her silence is calm detachment rather than anxious pursuit, you short-circuit the manipulation. She's expecting you to chase. That's the whole point of her withdrawal. When you don't, you introduce uncertainty into her framework. For perhaps the first time, she's the one wondering what you're thinking, what you're doing, and where she stands. Let me give you a practical example. She goes silent after a minor disagreement, expecting you to text repeatedly, call, and eventually apologize to restore communication. Instead, you go about your life, you pursue your goals, you enjoy your friends, you maintain your purpose and direction. When she eventually breaks the silence, and she almost always will, you respond casually, without resentment or desperation. This response communicates volumes. Her silence did not destabilize you emotionally. The power dynamic shifts immediately. She realizes that her most reliable tool for controlling your behavior no longer works. This forces genuine communication rather than strategic manipulation. Remember this Machiavellian truth: power is controlled absence. When you demonstrate that her silence cannot manipulate you, that you can match or exceed her capacity for strategic distance, you fundamentally alter the dynamic between you. This approach requires emotional discipline. The initial discomfort of not pursuing her when she goes silent will feel almost unbearable. Your instincts will scream at you to reach out, to fix things, to restore connection at any cost. Resisting this impulse is where your psychological strength is built. Think of it like an emotional muscle. The first time you hold firm against the manipulation of silence, it will be painful. The second time, slightly less so. By the third or fourth instance, you'll find yourself feeling centered and confident in the face of what once would have driven you to anxiety and desperation. There's another layer to this strategy that few men understand. When you refuse to be manipulated by silence, you activate deeper attraction triggers in female psychology. Women are naturally drawn to emotional strength and psychological stability in men. By demonstrating that her withdrawal tactics cannot destabilize you, you display exactly the kind of unshakable presence that women find most compelling. This isn't about playing games or creating toxic relationships. It's about establishing mutual respect. Women instinctively test for strength in men, and nothing demonstrates psychological strength more clearly than immunity to manipulation tactics. Many women deploy these strategies unconsciously, having observed their effectiveness without explicitly analyzing the power dynamics involved. When you calmly refuse to be manipulated, you create an opportunity for more conscious, mature interaction. You essentially invite her to relate to you from a more authentic place, rather than through strategies of control. When you maintain your composure and refuse to be controlled by her silence, something remarkable happens. You become more valuable in her eyes. The very strategy she deployed to control you now increases her attraction to you. This paradox, that refusing to chase actually makes you more desirable, is one of the great ironies of relationship dynamics that most men never discover. I want to be clear, this isn't about becoming cold or unresponsive yourself. It's about responding proportionally and maintaining your emotional center. When communication is flowing naturally, be fully present and engaged. It's specifically in response to manipulative silence that you must hold your ground. The ultimate goal isn't to win power games, but to transcend them entirely. When both people in a relationship realize that manipulation tactics don't work, more direct and honest communication becomes possible. This is the foundation for genuinely fulfilling connection. So tell me in the comments, have you experienced this form of silent manipulation? Did you recognize it at the time, or only in retrospect? Have you tried maintaining your frame when faced with feminine silence? Share your story below. If this video opened your eyes to dynamics you felt but couldn't name, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel for more truths about psychological dynamics that others won't tell you. And don't forget to check our previous videos on female testing strategies that every man needs to understand. Remember, in the realm of interpersonal power, what's unspoken often matters more than what's said. Master the silent game, and you master the relationship itself.